Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we are going to talk about Mary Magdalene. We're going to talk about my favorite book recommendations and my favorite deck recommendations. So I am having another round of very serious lighting issues in my office. So for now, we are here recording, taking advantage of the natural light. And hopefully I will be able to be recording down in my office again soon, but I didn't want to just not put out YouTube videos in the meantime because I really enjoy being here on YouTube and interacting with you guys in this way. So today we're talking about Mary Magdalene in not my office, but it's okay, right? Luckily, as a priestess who sits on the floor a lot, I have a floor chair to make this a little bit more comfortable for me. But Mary Magdalene, I think, is, for so many of us, kind of this gateway or this doorway out of the church and into a more authentic spiritual practice, or maybe not even out of the church and still into a more authentic spiritual practice. Because for so many people, myself included, she is the first big moment where we realize the church really didn't tell us everything. That really the story is truly incomplete, and she explains to us why we always felt like the story was incomplete. Because when we learn that Mary Magdalene was in fact not the repentant prostitute that she was made out to be, and instead very likely Jesus's, partner within his ministry, the one who funded his movement, continued to spread it after his death, that something inside of us wakes up when we learn this story, and we start to go, what else didn't the church tell us about, right? And so, of course, I'm going to talk about books, and there's a lot of things we know about Mary Magdalene historically, and from scripture, and, that the scholars have unearthed about her. We know that she was very important to Jesus and his ministry. There's a lot of evidence that supports that she, a lot of people believe that she funded his ministry. There's even support for the belief that she was a priestess in her own right and the feminine Christ. And there's a lot of support for the fact that she was the one who anointed him, and this is what allowed him to do his archetypal descent into the underworld and ascent back up. Now, there's also a lot of personal gnosis and a lot of things that we have come to believe about her that maybe we don't have scriptural, solid evidence for, but we do have a lot of evidence that would suggest things like her being a priestess in her own right. And she's become this really powerful entryway into this for a lot of people, into sacred feminine spirituality. And she really, kind of midwifes us through that journey and into something that is more authentic for us. Now, within the spiritual communities, I do think that there's a lot of tendencies to really lightwash her and turn her into a very light, of the love and of the light ascended master. And actually, Ruby talks about this over on her channel, and she just talked about this over on her Instagram yesterday. I've spoken about this before, and I completely agree that Mary Magdalene really, she's definitely a balanced deity or goddess or ascended master, whatever word works for you. But she really leans dark, in my opinion, right? So the dark goddesses, they hold all of the things about being feminine that have been shamed, that have been ostracized, that have been cut away and judged. And Mary Magdalene's story does that, right? And she's really capable of holding us in our really dark moments as we descend into the underworld. Her myth around anointing Jesus and then him descending into the underworld echoes, Isis in her journey with the underworld and her beloved, and Inanna and Inanna's journey into the underworld. And it leads us all the way back to the Venus cycle, the planet Venus, and how she moves through the sky. This is how the Rose lineage got its name. And she's really the entry point into that for a lot of people. Now, in my opinion, she also, is a part of the lineage that includes Lilith and Eve and Asherah, because, a lot of people aren't aware of Asherah's mythology as God's wife, or what really happened in the Garden of Eden with Eve being the initiator of humanity. And Mary Magdalene really was somebody who walked the planet when it was able to reunite her inner Eve and her inner Lilith. And this is something that we do in depth in my Reclamation program, if anybody's interested in that. So that is going to be opening up here kind of in the next week or so. So the link for that will be below. But we really do that very in depth within that program. And I think that Mary Magdalene is she's such a powerful energy to connect with, and her story really catalyzes people. It gets really the catalyst for a lot of people, and a really good example of what I'm always saying, which is something that I spoke about in Revealed, is that our stories are important. And we have this tendency in modern day society to think about our stories as like entertainment, as fiction. But they're more than that. They're how we develop our sense of self. They're how we understand, where we fit in the world. They're how we pass down our morals and our ethics. And they're how we develop our sense of identity. And so long within the church, the options were Eve, who caused the downfall of humanity, Mother Mary, who was the virginal mother, or the repentant prostitute, Mary Magdalene. And when we learn that that isn't actually Mary Magdalene's full story, something within us awakens, because that's what stories do. That's how stories work. They're really, really powerful. So let's talk about books first. Now, I have a handful of books. I think there it is. I think I'm missing one, but I have it. So my first recommendation is going to be Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson. So this is definitely my favorite book. This was a major catalyst for me on my path. I had learned about Mary Magdalene in college in a Women in Religion course, and learned that she was not, in fact, the prostitute from the Bible. And it changed something within me. And then when I rediscovered this book, rediscovered Mary Magdalene when this book was published, 2019 is the copyright, it really just changed the trajectory of my life. Now, this book is like 1/3 history of the early church and Mary Magdalene. It's like 1/3 Megan Watterson's personal spiritual memoir, and like 1/3 her theology as a trained theologian who considers herself like a feminist theologian. So this book is a really easy read. It's beautifully written. It's easy to read. And I think this is an excellent starting point. Now, after that, I really like The Gospel of Mary of Magdala by Karen King, and The Meaning of Mary Magdalene by Cynthia Bourgeau. So I really love these two books as well. Now, these get a little bit more scholarly. We get a little bit more history. Both still, in my opinion, like easy to read and digest, but that next step in scholarship and history, and really, deepening into every passage of the Gospel of Mary, because Gospel of Mary is not very long. We're missing the first few pages. We're missing pages in the middle. Sorry, a dog hair was floating by me. We're missing pages in the middle. It's not a very long gospel. I get asked a lot which translation of the Gospel of Mary that I recommend. I personally like Karen King's translation the best. I think it's a little bit more poetic, but you still don't lose anything. But all the translations I've read are good. Cynthia's good as well. Now, this book that I can't remember the name of the title right now, so I put a picture right here for you, is even that next step in scholarship. And he really goes through, line by line in the Gospel of Mary, and really talks about it on a historical and, scriptural and all of that type of a level. So I really, really like this book as well for history. So if you're looking for a first one to start with Mary Magdalene Revealed, okay? I think that this is the perfect entry point. Then you can work your way into one of these three, or all of them, just depending on how much you like to read, how many books you want to buy. These three, Karen King, Cynthia Bourgeau, or Jean something, again, is right here. And though that's going to give you this really strong historical context for what is going on in the Gospel of Mary, and how her story is influenced by like the Gospel of Thomas and these other Gospels that didn't make it into the Bible. So one of the things that's really important to understand is that before the Council of Nicaea, where we get the Nicene Creed, And before the creation of the Bible, which we can't have until we can have a book, which isn't until like the 4th-ish century, we have various versions of Christianity, okay? We have lots of other scriptures that are still floating around and being seen as authoritative by different groups of Christians. This is something Megan Watterson speaks about beautifully in her book. And so we have all these other scriptures that give us more context into Mary's story. And once you have the historical context from that perspective, then there are other books. Then you can get into, in my opinion, this is the order, but you don't have to listen to me. Give yourself that really nice base in history, and then you can start jumping into the UPG stuff, the personal gnosis, the books like that. So here's what I want to talk about with this. Is first, let's quickly talk about Saint Mary Magdalene, the Gnostic tradition of the Holy Bride by Tau Malachi. Now, I will be honest, I have not finished this book yet. I'm about halfway through. This is a written down oral tradition. This is the first time that I believe that like this oral tradition has been this extensively recorded inside of a book. So this is a really interesting take on Mary Magdalene, and I really, really love this. I can't really give a full review because I haven't finished it, but so far I'm really enjoying this one. Now, another really great one is this. So this is the Magdalene Mysteries, the left-hand path of the feminine Christ. Now, here's my deal with this book, okay? I love this book. I'm getting ready to do a reread. There's a lot of really good history in here. A lot of threads are woven together and I really love that. And you need to use your discernment, and you need to remember that just because it's written in a book does not necessarily make it true. There are things in this book that the authors present as historical fact that are not historical fact. They are opinion. And they don't give the historical evidence that has brought them to that opinion. And they haven't always separated out their personal gnosis and their personal opinion from what we have, like historical, like fact for, if that kind of makes sense. And I really have an issue when authors do that. I love, I teach about my own personal gnosis. I talk to students all the time about my personal opinions, what I've experienced to be true. And putting that into a book is fantastic, but I think that you need to be clear about it. So one of the books I get asked about a lot is like the, is it the Magdalene Manuscript? By Tom Kenyon. I can't remember the name of the book. It's a channeled book, but he's really clear about that. Like, this is a channeled book. And I think that sometimes this book does not do as good a job as it needs to. So I do really recommend this book. I think it's really a fascinating read. A lot of threads get tied together. But you just want to use your discernment, and you want to do your own fact checking, I think. Because I think that there are a lot of moments in here where they just don't explain to you how they reached that conclusion. And without historical context, without understanding the, languages that these scriptures were originally written in, it's easy to jump to conclusions as if they are historical fact when they simply aren't, once you understand, like, what a word means in Hebrew, or historical, cultural context of the time, things like that. So, love it. Highly recommend. Use your discernment. Okay. So let's talk about some decks. And I did a deck list video for working with Mary Magdalene a couple years ago, so I will link that down below because there is overlap on this list. And that way you can go listen to me talk about them there, and I don't need to go into so much detail here. Now, let's do a few runner-ups first. Now, I chose a few decks in my collection that are out of print, and I hate doing this to you guys, but I know that some of you will probably have these decks in your collection, and so being able to pull them out and use them for this purpose might give you a new way into them. And you may be able to find used copies, so we're just gonna really briefly mention 3 runner-ups that are out of print. Okay, so the first one is the Ember of Ember and Aura Tarot. Now, I've talked about this one on the channel before because this is one of my favorite tarot decks. This is was one of my first ones, and I'm so connected to this deck. However, this deck is out of print, and the creator has left the community, so there isn't going to be another reprint. But if you can find a copy of this deck, or if you have this deck, this is a really powerful one to use working with the Magdalene, because this is actually like a channeled Christ consciousness deck, and you definitely feel that in here. Now, next is the Divine Muses Oracle, and I think it's Marie Bento. And again, this one is out of print. But maybe we can get her to do another run. I'm not sure. Maybe you can find a used copy. And maybe you already have this deck in your collection. Now, when you look at this deck at first, I don't think that it instantly gives Mary Magdalene vibes. Okay, I get that. Like, it's, most of us associate with her with like reds and pinks and that type of thing. But one of the things I have come to view, or one of the ways I have come to understand Mary Magdalene, is really through an alchemical lens, okay? So she is so good at holding us while we move through something challenging and sort of alchemize that into something different. And I think that this deck is actually a really cool way into that. And because Mary Magdalene really has a lot of facets to her myth, you know, yes, she's a priestess. Yes, she is the feminine Christ. Yes, she is, you know, Jesus's partner. Within her myth, she is a mother. She is, you know, she's multifaceted. And so a deck like this, or even like the Kim Krans Oracle deck, Kim Krans archetype deck, I mean, where we have so many different archetypes at play, I think can also really give you a way into working with Mary Magdalene and understanding her mythology. Now, the third runner-up is the Love Oracle of Eden. Okay, so again, indie deck out of print. But one of the things, again, about Magdalene is that she is the feminine Christ. Okay, so she is the dark Christ. She is the left hand of Christ. She is the feminine Christ consciousness, right? I don't particularly love the Christ consciousness thing, only because of how it's used by a lot of people. But as that, she is a force of unwavering, undying love, right? And she is the dark, what love can look like in its darkness. She is the kind of love that takes care of other people from a place of overflow, from a place of radical self-love. Not in a people-pleasing, self-sabotaging sort of way that, for example, the Mother Mary is often depicted. Even though that's not, again, like, in my opinion, true within her mythology. That's how she's been depicted within the church. So I think that this deck is a really beautiful way into that, okay? Into that aspect of Mary Magdalene. Now, a couple of decks that I spoke about the last time that I'm looking at my pile of decks here. A few of the decks that I talked about last time I did this list is the Moon deck, which was also on my most recent video about gentle and empowering decks if you're also struggling with anxiety right now in the United States. So the Moon deck is a really good way into Mary Magdalene from the aspect of her gospel is about being human and divine at the same time, right? Fully human, fully divine. This is one of the primary teachings of the Gospel of Mary. And this deck gives us a way into that, in my opinion, where it really helps you to honor and take care of the human part of you, right? Because you are fully human and you are also a fully divine soul. And so this deck is a really great one to work with, in my opinion, for working with Mary Magdalene in that capacity. Again, so we're looking at that radical self-love that allows you to be fully human, have the fully human experiences, and return to the knowledge that you are also a divine soul. So that's this deck. I also have Work Your Light Oracle cards. Now these, again, on my most recent video and on the last Magdalene list I did. This is a really beautiful way, along with the White Light Oracle from Alana Fairchild. These two decks are really beautiful ways into the light aspects of Mary Magdalene. So these two are these are mass-produced decks, right? So they're a little bit more accessible, and they're popular, so I know a lot of us already have them in our collection. Like, I've had these two decks for years. This one I've had this one a really long time. So these two decks, I think, are really beautiful ways into, the Christ consciousness stream, the lineage that Mary Magdalene is a part of, and all of that stuff. So these two are beautiful options for that as well. And again, I spoke about these in the last Magdalene video and in my Gentle and Empowering deck list. So both of those are linked below. So let's see. These are, other than my out of print options, these last four are my personal favorites for working with Mary Magdalene. So we're gonna go in sort of roughly in order, but this isn't really in order from least to most favorite or anything. So first, let's briefly talk about the Circle of Doors Tarot. Now, I have not used this one personally to intentionally connect with Mary Magdalene. However, there's the Priestess card in this deck. This is my favorite depiction of the Priestess to date. I love this Priestess. Anyway, however, I think that this deck is such a powerful portal to the sacred feminine. I have used this deck for myself and for others constantly, and I have had really, really powerful experiences tapping into and channeling sacred feminine energies, beings, deities, goddesses, whatever word works for you there. And so I think that you could absolutely use this deck to work with Mary Magdalene. I don't see why you couldn't. I absolutely love this deck. And the imagery it's not, like, it doesn't transfer well on the camera, okay? Like, it's so much more beautiful in person. And I know, for example, like, we're all big fans of Racine's channel, and she talks a lot about oh no, I can't think of the name of the deck because I don't have it. The creator just also put out that Cave of Sybil Oracle deck. It's fine. I can't think of the name. It's a collage deck, and the artwork doesn't speak to me personally on that, but she and other people I have watched talk about it like being this really powerful portal to work with the guides and the divine beings and all the things. And that's how I feel about this deck. So I think that you could absolutely use this deck as a really, really powerful way to connect in with Mary Magdalene. Especially in her role as a priestess, okay? Now, the Soul Mirror Oracle cards are another one that I put on this list because Mary Magdalene very much holds that priestess archetype where she's sitting at the gates to your unconscious. She holds the midwife archetype, right? Where she is ushering you into a new phase, into a new way of being. And this deck, for me, like, Soul Mirror is a perfect name for it, and it's very much about being at threshold. So there's always a keyword, and then the light and the dark, or the shadow and the light aspects of it. So confusion, fearful or serene. Security, insecure or safe. Support, discouraged or encouraged. And so I think that this is a really powerful deck when we're standing at those thresholds, trying to decide how it is that we are supposed to be moving forward, what it is that we are supposed to be learning from some situation. And Mary Magdalene is really good at that. That's one of the things that she's excellent at and is all over in her gospel. And so this deck, I think, is a really beautiful one for connecting in with that energy of her, that aspect of her. Now, I also really love the Modern Hue Tarot. And this is by Ritual Planner. This is still in print. It's like $37 or something. It's actually a fairly accessible deck compared to like a lot of my indie decks are. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This is the original Rider-Waite-Smith imagery or line work. But they have, obviously here you can see, changed the color. So they have updated the color palette and they have used watercolors. And I have tried to use the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith on so many occasions. So many different printings of it, so many different, it's muted, it's this, it's whatever. I don't like the colors. I don't like the use of orange and yellow. I find it very aversive. Like, I just don't, okay? I really love this deck, though. And this deck showed me why everybody loves the Rider-Waite-Smith deck so much. And this has been over time one of my primary decks for working with Mary Magdalene and understanding her gospel and how it weaves together with the tarot. So I really, really love this deck for working with Mary Magdalene. I just really do. I think it's a really clear reader. I think that the color palette makes me think of the Sacred Feminine. It makes me think of Mary Magdalene, and it has been a very, very easy way for me to work with her energy, especially as I've created workshops and things around working with her. And then finally is the Mary Magdalene Oracle by Megan Watterson. Now, this is the only Mary Magdalene specific deck in my collection because none of the other ones have ever really called to me. Like, I see them and I hear people talk about them and I haven't felt pulled to purchase. Now, this deck, I don't particularly love the artwork. So this was not on the list the last time I created this video because I had not purchased it yet. And I really took my time purchasing this deck because the artwork it's not my style of collage work. And I wasn't feeling the need at the time for a deck specifically about the Gospel of Mary or about Mary Magdalene because I already had these other decks that were tapping me right into her energy. But I did finally buy this deck, obviously. And I do really like it. And I think that if you want a deck to work with in conjunction with her gospel, to work with in conjunction with her story, this is a beautiful one. And so I have really worked with this deck as I've been rereading Mary Magdalene Revealed. I have worked with this deck as a part of a daily draw. It actually pairs beautifully with the Witch Sisters Tarot, which was surprising for me. And I have found this to be a really, really useful deck for when I'm wanting to do especially daily draws and daily work around the lessons that Mary Magdalene has to teach and how those apply to my life, to my daily life, to my work, to how I see myself, to how I work with, just all the things. So I really like this deck. I've really been impressed with this deck a lot. So those are my deck and book recommendations. Now, if you are wanting to work with Mary Magdalene more in depth with the tarot, one of the things we are doing inside the temple now, which is my membership site where we do monthly ceremony and really deep shadow work, is we are doing cycles in there now. And so for the next few months, we are going to be working deeply with the Gospel of Mary and Mary Magdalene and the tarot. So every month we have a teaching video, we do a deep ceremony with deep shadow work, and then we have deepening practices as well so that you can continue to push that out into your daily life. And so we are going to be starting that as I'm posting this here now in February. So if you want to join us inside the temple and come with us on that journey, the link and the information is below. And if you are watching this in the future, then those replays are still going to be available. So if you still want to take advantage of that workshop, then you can still join the temple and you can go back and you can catch all the replays. So let me know if you have any questions about Mary Magdalene, if there's anything you would like me to expand upon in another video. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.